Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to map the type of stutter that Madeon uses on his Launchpads during his DJ sets, such as this example. Right, so the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure that our Launchpad is in user 2 mode because that is the mode we are going to map to. So if you could see in the example, this first button would turn the stutter off. And so the song will keep playing and the DJ set will go without the stutter interrupting. But these next 7 buttons in this row trigger a specific interval of stutter. So at the top here, it'll be a 1/64th going down all the way to the bottom where it'll only be a 1-bar stutter. So the way we're going to want to automate this is we're going to put a beat repeat into the master effects. So just make sure you are in the master tab or master track. So we're going to make sure the chance is all the way to 0%, so that way there won't be any variation in our stutters. It'll be perfectly 1/2 bar stutter or 1/4 bar stutter. There won't be any unwanted variation in there. So next we're going to want to group. So right click and go down to group, which will allow us to set in macro controls and basically automate this grid and repeat buttons to these macro controls so we can automate them to the Launchpad. So the first thing we're going to want to do is take this repeat and we're going to right click and map to macro 1. So you'll see it shows up here. And then we're going to do the same with grid, except we're going to map it to macro 2. Now we're going to route these 2 macro controls to the Launchpad. So we're going to do that by hitting this MIDI tab up here, which opens up our MIDI mappings. And there's these blue bars over the parameters that we can map to the Launchpad or different MIDI controllers. So we're going to left click this blue box, this repeat macro, and we are going to assign that to the entire row. So we're going to hit this button and keep holding it down until we hit this button. So now this entire row controls that macro. And we're going to do the same with the grid macro, except we are not going to use this first button. We are going to start with the second button. So we're going to hold that one and then go all the way up to the last one. So now we're going to adjust a couple settings that will make sure the stutter will trigger when we want it to. So if you can see, this repeat button will only activate when the repeat macro control reaches a 64 value. So as you can see, at 64 the button is on, but if we go anything under that, it'll turn off. So what we're going to do to fix that is we're going to go to MIDI and go to this repeat tab, and the minimum we're going to set to 63, which is one value under the 64. So what this does is now when we hit this button, you'll see here at the repeat, it'll jump to 63. But as we go anything over that, it'll go well over 64. So now these 7 buttons will trigger the beat repeat or the stutter, but this one will bring it under to turn the stutter off. So now the last thing we're going to want to do is manage this grid macro control to make sure it's perfectly set to how we want it. So the grid is basically the size of the stutter. So what we're going to want is this button to trigger a 1-bar stutter all the way up to this bar triggering a 1/64 bar stutter. So we're going to go back to MIDI, and these controls are actually inverted. So as you can see, the minimum, which is this button, will trigger a 1/256 stutter, which we don't want. We want this button to be a 1-bar. So we're going to turn that up all the way to 1 bar. And we're going to want this top button to trigger a 1/64th. So we're going to turn this value all the way down to that 1/64 value. So now, as you can see, looking at the grid, when we press this first button, the repeat will be off, and we're just gonna have the regular song going through the track. But now when we hit this will now change so that the repeat is on, as you can see here, and we will have a 1-bar stutter. And as we go to the second one, it'll be a 1/2, and then a 1/4, and then a 1/8, and then a 1/16, a 1/32, and a 1/64. So the last thing I forgot to mention is to make sure that this setting is on instrument, because when its default is on mix, then the dry signal of the track will be mixed with the stutter effect. So when it's on instrument, just the stutter effect will show, and the dry signal of the track will be cut out. So now, as you can see, I dropped in a song. So we're just going to do a little example of how this works. So we're going to activate the song. Make sure the volume's up enough so you can hear it. And so, as you can see, this top stutter will give it a 64th stutter. And all the way back to the 0 value where it'll play. So that is it, guys. This has been my first tutorial, so I know it was a little sloppy, but I actually figured some of this out while trying to look up how it was done, and I just noticed that there wasn't any tutorials on this exact method, so I thought it would be valuable to share it with you all. If you have any questions, I will certainly be there to answer them. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.